And now, here is your host, Don Cornelius. Right now, we turn our attention to the Soul Train gang, the Soul Train line, the master storyteller, Mr. Curtis Mayfield, and the showed-up boss Pete Shaw, one he chose to call Get Down.
He had been in the club many times. Many people saw him, so they didn't have any fear at the time. It was horrible, horrible. And as Playboy rules were, you couldn't call the police.
What really happened to Don Cornelius, the man behind Soul Train? Did he leave behind secrets that no one knows about? Why did his death shock everyone? Was his life more complicated than we thought?
It was horrible, horrible.
Some say there's a lot we don't know about him. What were the hidden stories behind his success? Let's take a look at the surprising truths about Don Cornelius and the secrets he may have taken to his grave.
Anybody you can think of who is black, who works in television, and who owns the show and who has the title of executive producer came after Soul Train.
Back in the day, Saturday mornings were special. If you loved music and dancing, there was only one place to be: watching Soul Train. This show wasn't just entertainment, it was a movement. It brought funky beats, amazing dance moves, and the best black music right into people's homes. When Soul Train hit national TV, things were changing. The 1960s were over, and old school shows like The Andy Griffith Show and Petticoat Junction were fading away. Those shows mostly showed white families and didn't really reflect what was happening in America. But the 1970s brought new TV shows like All in the Family and Sanford and Son, which tackle real issues like racism, war, and feminism. But Soul Train was different. It wasn't a sitcom with jokes and stories. It was a showcase of black culture, music, and style.
He showed us that being who we are is beautiful. We didn't have to change who we were to be accepted.
And the man behind it all was Don Cornelius. He wasn't like other TV hosts. He was smooth, serious, and always in control. With his deep voice and cool attitude, he guided the show like a train conductor, bringing audiences the hottest soul, funk, and R&B acts. At that time, there was no other show like Soul Train. It gave black artists a stage to shine and gave America a taste of true black culture. Before the Civil Rights Movement, a show like this wouldn't have been possible. But by the 1970s, the world was ready, and Don Cornelius made sure everyone got a ticket to ride the Soul Train.
Right now, let's welcome aboard what, in my opinion, is fast becoming the most exciting musical attraction in the business.
Don Cornelius was not just a TV host, he was a man with big dreams. Before he became famous, he had a tough journey. He was a soldier in the Korean War and worked many jobs, trying to find his place in the world. But one thing stood out about him: his deep voice and love for black music and culture.
He brought good music to the masses, you know what I'm saying, period. Don Cornelius, I think, is probably responsible for a lot more careers than he's ever been given credit for.
In the 1960s, Don worked as a disc jockey, DJ, and announcer for WVON, a radio station in Chicago. He had a talent for talking and knew how to connect with people. He also hosted a TV program called A Black's View of the News, but he had a bigger idea. He wanted to create a music show that focused on black artists, something like American Bandstand, but with soul. At first, money was a big problem. Don didn't have a big budget, so he kept his show local in Chicago. But that was actually a good thing. Chicago was full of talented musicians and dancers. The city was even called the dance capital of the world. Don found young people dancing on the streets and gave them a chance to show their moves on TV. He paid them by letting them promote their own dance styles. The first season of Soul Train had big names like Curtis Mayfield, Jerry Butler, and the Chi Lights, artists from Chicago who were happy to be part of the show. People loved it. The show quickly became a hit, and Don knew he had something special.
Right now we turn our attention to the Soul Train gang, the Soul Train line, the master storyteller, Mr. Curtis Mayfield, and the showed-up boss Pete Shaw, one he chose to call Get Down.
Then came his big break. A businessman named George Johnson, who owned a black hair product company, saw the show's potential and became a sponsor. With Johnson's help, Soul Train went national in 1971. Don moved the show from Chicago to Los Angeles, where he searched for the best dancers in the city. He and his team went to parks and schools to find fresh talent. Instead of paying them with money, he gave them a chance to be seen on TV, which was a huge deal back then. Even without big paychecks, dancers and viewers loved Soul Train. The show became a movement. In the 1970s, as soul and funk music grew, so did Soul Train. It was more than just entertainment, it gave young black people a chance to see successful black professionals on TV. Don Cornelius was in charge, and behind the scenes there were black floor managers, directors, and producers. This was rare in those days. Even music legends were amazed at what Don had done. James Brown once asked him, "Who's backing you?" Don proudly answered, "Just me." He built Soul Train from nothing and made it a symbol of black culture and success. Now, if you watch Soul Train, you probably noticed that most artists didn't sing live. Instead, they moved their lips to a pre-recorded song. This is called lip syncing. But why did the show do this? The main reason was money. Running a TV show is expensive. If artists sang live, the producers would have to set up microphones, speakers, and a sound system for each performance. That takes a lot of time and costs a lot of money. By using pre-recorded songs, the show saved money and kept things simple. Another reason was control. When artists sing live, mistakes can happen. They might forget the lyrics, hit a wrong note, or sound different from their records. The show wanted performances to be smooth and perfect. Lip syncing made sure that every song sounded just like the audience expected. However, not everyone liked this rule. Some artists and fans thought it felt fake. They believed music should be performed live with real emotions and energy. Some singers, like Al Green and Stevie Wonder, preferred live performances because they wanted to connect with the audience in a real way.
When you believe in things that you don't understand.
Even though some people didn't like it, Soul Train stayed popular for many years. The show helped many artists become famous and gave viewers great music and dancing. Whether lip-synced or not, it created unforgettable moments in music history. Whitney Houston was one of the greatest singers of all time. She had a powerful voice and sold millions of records. But in 1988, something surprising happened at the Soul Train Music Awards. Some people in the audience booed her. Why did they boo? Some thought her music was too pop or too white. They felt she didn't fit into traditional black music. Soul Train was all about celebrating black artists, and some people didn't think Whitney belonged. But was that fair? Whitney didn't let the criticism break her. In 1991, she talked about it on the Arsenio Hall show. She said, "I got a lot of flack about singing too white." But she made it clear. She grew up watching Soul Train just like any other black kid. She believed she was singing the way God made her to sing. Despite the boos, Whitney kept going. Less than 10 years later, at the 2000 Soul Train Music Awards, she was honored as Female Artist of the Decade. This was a huge moment. It proved she was more than just a pop star, she was a legend. Looking back, the booing seemed unfair. Whitney's voice touched people of all backgrounds. She broke barriers and made history. In the end, her music spoke louder than any boos ever could.
He had been in the club many times. Many people saw him, so they didn't have any fear at the time.
Don was accused of something very serious. In a new documentary series called Secrets of Playboy, a former Playboy bunny, PJ Maston shared an upsetting story about Cornelius. She claims that he locked up and sexually assaulted 2 young women many years ago. Maston, who was once a bunny mother at the Playboy Mansion, told her story in the documentary. She said that Cornelius was well known to the women at Playboy because of his VIP status. On one occasion, Maston says that two sisters who were new to Playboy caught Cornelius's eye. He invited them to a VIP area and later to his home for a party. After the sisters went to Cornelius's house in his fancy Rolls Royce, they disappeared for 3 days. Maston said that no one knew where they were. When they finally showed up, they were in very bad condition. The women had escaped from Cornelius's home and were found bloodied, battered, and drugged. They claimed that they were held against their will in separate rooms and were abused by Cornelius.
It was horrible, horrible. And as Playboy rules were, you couldn't call the police.
According to the sisters, they were tied up and one of them heard the other being hurt. Maston said the women followed Playboy rules and didn't contact the police. Instead, the Playboy security team took care of it, and the women were told not to talk to the press about what happened. Maston said she felt angry because Cornelius was never punished. He was back in the club the following week, she explained. Even though the women went through a terrible ordeal, no charges were filed against Cornelius. Maston also admitted that she felt guilty for not speaking out, but she feared no one would believe her, and she knew Playboy would protect Cornelius.
Security there was not about making sure these girls were safe. It was about making sure that the guests didn't do anything that Hefner would not have wanted them to do.
Cornelius's son, Tony Cornelius, spoke to the media after the documentary aired. He said that Maston's story was unbelievable and didn't have enough proof to back it up. He also denied the claims made against his father. According to Tony, this was just a part of a story with no solid evidence. It's important to note that Cornelius was never investigated or charged with sexual assault. However, he did have legal issues in 2008 when he was arrested for domestic violence against his then wife. In 2009, Cornelius pled no contest to one count of domestic violence and was put on probation for 3 years. In October 2008, Cornelius was arrested at his home in Los Angeles on a serious charge. He was accused of domestic violence, which means hurting his wife. After the arrest, he was allowed to leave the jail by paying bail. In November 2008, he went to court and faced charges of hurting his wife and trying to stop her from telling the police. In December 2008, Cornelius returned to court and said he was not guilty of hurting his wife. However, the situation got worse when his wife, Victoria Avila Cornelius, also known as Victoria Chapman, got 2 restraining orders against him. These orders meant he was not allowed to be near her. By March 2009, Cornelius changed his plea to no contest, which means he did not argue with the charges. As a result, he was placed on probation for 36 months. This means he had to follow certain rules and could face jail time if he broke them. But the accusations against Don Cornelius have sparked a lot of conversations and raised many questions about the man behind Soul Train.
And from New York, let's welcome the super hot rap crew as they join us to do their latest single.
By the end of the 1970s, something new and exciting was growing in New York City's black communities: hip-hop. According to journalist John Heilemann, hip-hop was the last new American art form. It mixed funk and disco, 2 popular music styles that were featured on Soul Train.
When you believe in things that you don't understand.
Even though hip-hop became very popular in the 1980s and beyond, Don Cornelius, the creator of Soul Train, wasn't a fan at first. Cornelius didn't like the new music at all. In fact, many funk and soul artists didn't think much of hip-hop in its early days. But Cornelius was also open-minded and willing to give it a chance. In 1980, just 1 year after Rapper's Delight by the Sugar Hill Gang became the first hip-hop song to make the top 40, Cornelius invited Curtis Blow, one of hip-hop's stars, onto the show. During the interview, Cornelius admitted he didn't really understand hip-hop or why it was so popular.
It's entitled Take You There. Ladies and gentlemen, Pete Rock and CL Smooth.
Despite his hesitation, more and more hip-hop artists appeared on Soul Train in the 1980s. Even though Cornelius wasn't fully convinced, many hip-hop stars looked up to him as an inspiration. Sadly, the 1980s also marked the beginning of difficult times for both Don Cornelius and Soul Train.
Never judge a book by the cover. Discover the soul brother with the mechadon, working brunette to blonde.
The show faced a lot of competition from new channels. In the early 1980s, both MTV and BET were created, which took away Soul Train's audience. MTV focused on music, but at first it didn't play music by black artists. BA, on the other hand, was a channel made specifically for black audiences, and it also offered a lot of music. With these new channels stealing viewers, Soul Train started losing its popularity. Don Cornelius had been the face of Soul Train, introducing new music and artists to the world every weekend. But now, with music playing everywhere on TV, Cornelius started to seem out of touch. As younger hosts and artists took over, Cornelius began to feel like he didn't belong. He even joked in an interview saying, "I could be like Yo What's Up, but I'd look stupid." On top of the falling ratings, Don Cornelius was also facing health problems. In 1982, he had surgery to fix blood vessels in his brain. By the time the 1990s arrived, Cornelius felt it was time to step away from Soul Train and retire after years of working hard to make the show a success.
You do too. I know when I was growing up, my brother played guitar too, and every time I'd say, "Hey man, teach me how to play guitar," he'd say, "Get away, squirt,"
In 1973, TV producer and host Dick Clark decided to create a show called Soul Unlimited. He made this show to compete with the popular Soul Train, which was the only show on TV at that time that focused on black music and culture. But there was a problem. Many people thought Soul Unlimited had racial issues and was trying to take away viewers from Soul Train. The man behind Soul Train, Don Cornelius, didn't like this. He felt that Dick Clark was trying to take down the show that he worked so hard to build. Cornelius even got help from Jesse Jackson, a well-known activist, to speak out against Clark's show. They said that Clark was trying to undermine the success of the only black-owned TV show.
The pretty lady on my left is Miss Gladys Knight. Hi, Gladys.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing fine.
Very good.
Hey, I'm glad to have you here with us today.
It's our pleasure.
Because of all the complaints and the controversy, ABC, the network that aired Soul Unlimited, decided to cancel it after just a few episodes. People felt that the show was not doing the right thing and wasn't respectful to the work Cornelius had put into Soul Train.
And now, here is your host, Don Cornelius.
After the cancellation, Dick Clark and Don Cornelius decided to put aside their differences. They agreed to work together on a special TV series that would feature popular R&B and soul artists. This cooperation showed that even after competition, both men saw the value in supporting black music and culture on television. After over 2 decades of hosting Soul Train, Don Cornelius made the tough decision to step away from his role as the show's full-time host in 1993. Health problems were part of the reason for his departure, and he chose to focus more on being the executive producer behind the scenes. It was a big change for the show, and it wouldn't be until 1997 that a new permanent host would take Cornelius's place.
My name is Shamar Moore, and believe me when I tell you, we getting ready to have some fun up in here. Why? Because I stand up here week after week trying to get you hyped over the fact that don't nobody throw a party like we do.
For the 4 years in between, Soul Train went through a series of guest hosts. These were celebrities from all parts of the black entertainment industry, and each one tried to bring their own style to the show. Finally, in 1997, after the show's 27th season, the producers decided on Mistro Clark as the new host. Clark was a well-known comedian in Los Angeles and had been mentored by famous black comedians like Robin Harris and Ronaldo Ray. He brought energy and humor to the show, which appealed to a younger audience. However, his time as the host didn't last long. Clark and Cornelius didn't always see eye to eye behind the scenes, leading to Clark's departure after just 2 years. The next host to take over was Shamar Moore, an actor and model who hosted Soul Train for 4 years. Moore became very popular with his fun, energetic style, and even had some memorable dance moments on the show. But after Moore's successful run, the show's producers decided it was time for a new face again. Dorian Gregory, an actor who had guest hosted the show in 1996, became the permanent host in 2003. Cornelius had already considered Gregory as a potential full-time host, and his years of guest hosting helped him earn the role. Gregory hosted the show for the final 3 seasons. Sadly, after 35 years of bringing music and dance into homes all over America, Soul Train ended its national run on March 25, 2006. The show was part of so many people's lives and had become a symbol of black culture and music. After the show ended, Soul Train still aired classic episodes in syndication until 2007, when the distributor Tribune Entertainment stopped operations. In 2008, Don Cornelius sold Soul Train to Mad Vision Entertainment, a company hoping to bring the show back to life. Cornelius, who had been part of the show for nearly 40 years, said that it was time to move on. He told reporters that 35 years is a long time. A few years later, in 2011, basketball legend Magic Johnson's group bought Soul Train and had big plans to continue the legacy of the show. One of those plans was the Soul Train Cruise, which launched in 2013. The cruise brought together music legends like Kool and the Gang, Chaka Khan, and Nile Rodgers to perform on board. In 2016, Soul Train found a new home with the BET network. BET had already revived the Soul Train Awards in 2009, and they wanted to keep the show's legacy alive while also looking for new ways to grow it. The Soul Train brand has been through many changes, but it still holds a special place in music and TV history.
True pioneer in the music world is gone. For a generation of Americans, Saturday morning meant the breakthrough show called Soul Train.
On February 1st, 2012, Don Cornelius passed away at the age of 75. He died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound at his home. The news of his death shocked people around the world. Many famous names, including Reverend Jesse Jackson, Aretha Franklin, and Snoop Dogg, paid tribute to him. They called him the Black Dick Clark because, like Clark, Cornelius was a big part of TV culture, but with a special focus on black music and artists. Don Cornelius was the host and producer of Soul Train, a TV show that started in 1971 and brought black culture and music into millions of homes. Soul Train was famous for showcasing soul, funk, and the early days of disco music, along with amazing dance moves. Nelson George, who wrote about the show in his 2014 book, The Hippest Trip in America, said Soul Train allowed everyone to enjoy the excitement and energy of black music. He helped bring black joy into living rooms across America. In 2019, BET made a series called American Soul that told the story of Don Cornelius and Soul Train. Cinqua Walls played Cornelius in the show and it got good reviews. Around the same time, there were plans for a Soul Train musical to hit Broadway. Sadly, the musical was delayed because of COVID-19, but the impact of Don Cornelius's work continues to inspire new generations. His legacy lives on through the music, the dances, and the joy he shared with the world.
He showed us that being who we are is beautiful. We didn't have to change who we were to be accepted.
For many, Soul Train no longer felt like the cultural icon it used to be, yet it still had a loyal audience who remembered the golden days. In the last years of Soul Train, the show tried to stay relevant by inviting new, young artists with bold styles. The idea was to capture the attention of younger viewers and stay in line with changing music and television trends. But one particular performance went too far. Despite this controversial ending, the legacy of Soul Train has never been tarnished. The show will always stand as a symbol of creativity, music, and community. In fact, Soul Train's influence continues to be felt today. The Soul Train Music Awards, which still honors the best in R&B, hip-hop, and soul, is one way the show's spirit lives on. The event continues to celebrate the impact Soul Train had on the music world, connecting generations of artists and fans. The fashion and style of Soul Train also left a lasting mark. The bold outfits worn on the show continue to inspire modern designers and fashion trends. While Soul Train may no longer air on television, it remains a symbol of pride, creativity, and community. It will always be remembered as a groundbreaking show that brought music, dance, and culture together in a way that had never been done before. Do you have any memories of Soul Train? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more exciting stories.